What's up guys, ZiSotto here, and today we're taking a look at the patch notes for patch 5.5, Time to Party. This patch will head the servers next week on Tuesday as usual if all goes as planned, and it comes with quite a few changes. As usual, we quickly look at the skins and then go on to the balance section and talk about that for the most part, and that's going to be longer today. So, we get quite a few skins coming up, going from the top. We just look at them in the bigger version. Unfortunately, the bigger version is a little bit weird. This is actually not the first one. I'm not sure why it's shown at the front, or it's a bit messed up here. Let's just start where we should start, and that's with this skin. That is basically a Nemesis 2B skin from Nier Automatica, whatever. You can see what the focus of the skin lies on. Another badass, sexy Nemesis skin. I dig it though, I think it looks pretty cool. Then we have a cutesy AMC. The complaint that a lot of people have about this one is that the voice pack doesn't really match. It's still kind of terrifying and not really cutesy. You can see Bako's down there as his bear skin. And we have a Zeus skin, a mech Zeus, also pretty cool. And then we can move over here to the other skins that we had before. No, we're going to the matchmaking update. We get to that. This one is Cosmic Capri, which I'm not quite sure why this exists, because he already has a cosmic skin, basically. It's like Stargazer or something. But it exists now. It's a bit different. It's more like the Salt skins, kind of, or Nebula Medusa, with this like purple glow effect. And he can float around that skin, which is pretty cool. I think the floating animation is really the thing that I like about that skin. Everything else is just like, why do we need this? But whatever. Then we have an Artemis skin, Orbital Scout, or also known as a Destiny Artemis. Bit late on that train, I would say, but it actually looks pretty cool. Also has kind of a dinosaur pet, kind of dinosaur tusky. Yeah. And then we've got a gold skin for Mr. Achilles. So gold, diamond, legendary. We have the same thing for AMC because he's got a skin. And we finally have the same thing for Nemesis as well. So a lot of skins in this patch, a lot of cool things in that regard, but that's not going to be our main concern. Our main concern starts right here. Project Olympus is getting another upgrade, and this one... Please make it right, Hyris. Please let this work out. Matchmaking. The matchmaker is undergoing significant adjustments. Patch 5.5 will begin tests on the new matchmaker. For full details, click here. And the full details are what we have right here. I'm not going to go through all of that here, but quickly go over it at least. So basically, there's a new code for matchmaking now. More efficient by changing the core code is the headline here, basically. Many variables are adjusted to focus on better matchmaking. New code uses much more efficient math to group players who are similar in level, experience, and skill level. It also strives to find better balance in skill level per team. This is especially important, I think. We also expect to find matches faster. I'm surprised that with all these changes, it's still supposed to find matches faster, because usually for me, matches in a faster time means worse matches. But considering that there seem to be major changes behind the scenes, and I know that that has been going on for a while, I've actually sent some of my games over too, that should definitely have an impact. But the important thing is you will have an impact on this as well. So first of all, this will not be all the time. The matchmaking will be changed for certain times of the day with certain popularity and blah, blah, blah. So you will have to see if you get the new matchmaker or not. You don't know. You will just, either get a good match or a bad match, hopefully, depending on which matchmaking you get. And what Hyris asks for is to give as much feedback as possible. So community involvement is key here. Player feedback will be very important to the process. Any matchmaking that looks strange or unintended should be reported. Please include the in-game match ID and share a short statement on what you felt went wrong. On patch day, the Hyris community team will make an r/Smite thread, so Reddit, and a tweet where players can post this information. So you don't have to send in like some email or something. As long as you're on Reddit or on Twitter, you will be able to send it in there. I would recommend making an account for that if you don't have one yet, just to participate. Keep in mind that you might not feel immediate changes on 5.5 patch day. Only players in the right time and place for the sample data will. All players should still send us matchmaking feedback either way though. So if you feel a match is weird, send it to him. Doesn't matter if it's new matchmaking or old matchmaking, because you won't be able to tell. Just send it to them and they can then see if it's the new or old matchmaking and see if it's good or bad. There obviously is the explanation that matchmaking still isn't perfect. There's times where there aren't enough players, etc. That's something you should be aware of yourself with a little bit of common sense. You know that if you queue at 5 in the night, Siege probably won't get that great of a match. So I really hope that a lot of you send in your matches, because that is really what is going to help this. If no one sends in matches, then they can't tell that things are going bad. So this is going to be very, 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 very important, and could really shape Smite as a game in the future, because I think one of the biggest issues we have overall is matchmaking. So I'm very happy that Hi-Rez is doing something about this. Really, really glad. I feel like this is something we've been waiting for a long time. I especially have been. I've always been talking about this, and I'm really happy to see some change to this now. And I'd like to thank Hi-Rez for that, actually. This one is definitely a good one. All right, moving on with the patch. There's a lot of other things we have to go through. Custom auto builds will now basically sell your starter at the end of the build and build another item instead, which is nice. The other fixes here are rather minor. VGS fixes for console, incorrect scoreboard issue, and that could have been actually problematic because it didn't show like what your allies were building, but that's fixed. And new players will get a lot of different rewards now, as you can see, even like something like 50% of any skin. So a lot going on in that regard, a lot of options for new players to be more rewarded for leveling up all the way up to level 30. And that should be helping and encouraging players to grind all the way up, especially because at the beginning it can be a bit frustrating to play Smite. And then there's also the lowered XP scaling basically until level 30. So it's easier to reach level 30 and then it slows down a little bit, but that's just so people can, jump into ranked fast and stuff if they want to. And then we have updates to the tutorial quest as well, and some more console bug fixes and some general bug fixes. These bug fixes are partially impactful. For example, fix an issue where certain objects would not have their health bar appear, or fix an issue where guards that flew over towers were getting shot by the tower. So this is actually stuff that may have impact in your games as well, but still rather minor overall. There's all these kinds of new effects, mech level tech, level FX, birthday cake, poopy, jump stamp, okay, I hope that's not the emoji, baby drone, ward skin, all this kind of stuff. And there are a lot of things more in the awesome chests now. We are getting a lot of awesome chests with the whole thing that's going on at the moment generally, so I'm not surprised that's happening. Godlike chest also gets some new rewards, and the Fantasy Point store gets Primal Huntress Artemis, King of the Deep Poseidon, and Genroid Janus. What I can say about the rewards is I am pretty certain that at least the AMC, if I recall correctly, and also the Nemesis will be in the upcoming birthday bundle. And that brings us to balance changes. First of all, some actually pretty important balance changes that were kind of not mentioned in the patch notes themselves. Fire Giant buff. Increased bonus damage to structures from 20 to 25%. Enhanced Fire Giant buff. Increased bonus damage from structures from 20% to 30%. Conquest Towers, Tier 1 tower, increased base power from 200 to 215. So on one hand, if you get a Fire Giant late game, you have more of a chance to just, at least get a Phoenix down, close the game out. This is due to the fact that there's a lot of comeback potential in Smite at the moment. So they kind of want to make sure that the leading team still keeps its lead with a Fire Giant and can at least build some pressure. And then you have the Conquest Towers, which are kind of the opposite. They want to take a bit of the edge of the early game, where you could basically very easily tower dive. This is interesting because it also may mean that minions may need less shots to be killed. We have to see that if it actually turns out that way, but this 15 damage could actually be relevant if it's 15 per shot. If a wave is killed faster after being pushed in a tower, that would actually be impactful for the gameplay. So sounds like a minor change. It might be more impactful. Would have to check that first. Item balance. Mellis. Mellis was recently redesigned to have more synergy with abilities. Well, or not. However, the passive was too limited and confusing. In this update, we are updating the passive ability on Mellis again to make the link between crits and abilities as clear as possible. Now, interesting fact, I actually made a video with Naja with a double Mellis proc today. I think Naja is the only god in the game who can actually do that at the moment, where you can crit Mellis twice in an ability rotation. But Mellis gets a change, and I think this change is for the better, because Mellis was such a niche item that only Naja could make use of it. New passive. On a successful critical strike, your abilities deal 35% more damage for the next 3 seconds. This is huge. Don't underestimate that. 35 more damage, the comparison that was made in that context, I think by Flairboot or by Schnitzel, was that it's kind of like Hydra's, but for abilities. Instead of having your basics deal a certain percentage more damage, it's your abilities, but it's for 3 seconds. Now, not every character makes similar use of that. This is very clearly aimed at characters that build Malice as a single crit item and then use other abilities afterwards. But with how strong it might become, it could possibly also be very strong with multiple crit items, just forcing this passive for extra damage all the time. So, when we think about this, 35% damage on an abilities after a crit, in many situations that won't work out. If you're playing your typical assassin, then you will not crit before using your abilities. You will engage, use your abilities, and then throw your basics in between, and then eventually get the crit. But by that time, you may have, used whatever, 1 or 2 or 3 abilities already, and maybe the basics are just what you're using to clear up the kill, and then you get the crit. And it's like, oh, right, great. My abilities do more damage now, but my abilities are on cooldown already. With hunters, this is a little different, ability-based hunters, because you can, in fact, poke from range. For example, a guy like Medusa can do that. Maybe Uller not so much because you have this combo going in, but anyone who can kind of use their basics before abilities can benefit from that. Though, even in that case, many hunters will use their abilities first and use them as setup for their basics. Think for example, of Hou Yi. And that's going to be the weird thing. But those gods who don't have this situation can very much benefit from Malice. The first one that comes to mind here, outside of obviously Naja with his ultimate, no surprise there, is Serket. If with Serket you dash someone, like you 2 and dash them, and then you get the crit on the first part of the dash, the damage is amplified for the rest of the dash, and you ult them after, according to how it's described here, it should affect true damage, and then your ult will deal more damage. They might make an exception because of what I just said, because it would otherwise be super crazy on Serket, I think. Another god that can greatly benefit from this, aside of the obvious two, is Hun Batz. With Hun Batz, you can often get a crit after your first ability, because you're always going to do ability, basic attack, ability, basic attack, the cancel thing. And if you get your ultimate with a Malice proc, and you have like more than one enemy around, if you somehow manage to get in, crit, and then drop your ultimate, it's going to be so much damage on so many people so quickly. Like, people often underestimate Hun Batz's ultimate damage. They often think it's just a CT tool, but if you look at the scaling of the ability and the damage that comes out of it, it would be brutal with Malice. So I definitely think Malice will be very scary on certain characters. How much it finds its general use is questionable. I would not be entirely surprised if we see some wonky stuff going forward, like Deathbringer Malice, in order to really, really maximize the damage of everything that follows after, and some disturbingly high damage numbers. Next item, also a very drastic change. Midgardian Mail, and the fact that Sloth's movement speed and attack speed is useful, but the 30% chance to trigger made its power highly variable and difficult to rely on. Removing this RNG and streamlining the effect to always trigger and stack up to its current power after multiple hits. That's pretty rough, because Midgardian Mail before that was RNG. It was annoying. I loved the item in its concept, but it was just not reliable enough. But hear me out. Or hear this passive, rather. New passive. When hit by a basic attack, that enemy has their movement speed and attack speed reduced by 15% for 2 seconds. This effect can stack up to 2 times. It can stack with other item slow effects. So, 45% attack speed slow? No, sorry. It's just stacking up to 2 times. Never mind that. I thought an additional 2 times. 30% attack speed slow and 30% movement slow, which is already stronger, way stronger than just 30% chance to just proc. It's just a reliable chance. Get hit twice and you punish them hard. But you also stack it with other item slow effects, like Witchblade, which is right underneath. So you can get like a 50% attack speed slow. That's, yeah. Or with Frostbound, you can throw a Frostbound in there. And the slow stack. All the slow stack on top of it, apparently. That's scary. I think Midgardian will be super key, and the interesting thing to me is that Midgardian was already picked up on Hunters in the SPL, like in the this week, and Midgardian is also like such a strong counter now that Hunters will really struggle, and Hunters were not the strongest role as of late. They had enough problems as is, I think. I was happy that Hunters have problems because Hunters were for multiple seasons the gods that do not have any problems. They were always the ones that were like sitting very comfortably. And now you hear all the pros complaining on Twitter and saying, oh, I'm a dodgeball as a hunter, you know, I have to run away all the time. I can't do anything. That's Hunters feeling for the first time what it actually feels like to be a balanced class, I would personally say. But shoving that Midgardian male in their face on top of that, that is brutal. That is scary. And I am mildly terrified for what may happen to Hunters as well as any attack speed reliant assassin or maybe even warrior. But there are also changes in the other direction, so it's not all just against Hunters here. Witchblade, on the other hand, is also against Hunters, but Witchblade is not the key component against Hunters, I would say. The problem was that Witchblade didn't really have its place, stretched too thin between offense and defense, and as such, the health was increased from 100 to 200. I actually had to open up Witchblade stats because I keep losing track of those because they're actually a lot. So Witchblade, 2,050 gold, not very expensive. Now, 200 health, 10% cooldown reduction, 20% attack speed, and 10% movement speed, as well as enemy guards within 55 units have their attack speed reduced by 20%. I think this item is really, really good now. If you're in solo and you're against a basic attacking whatever warrior, and you're a basic attacking warrior yourself. Erlang Shen, all the way. Cooldown reduction and attack speed, super good. 200 health, really good. 10% movement speed means you can potentially even consider just rushing this instead of boots. I mean, it's 400 more than power boots. It's not the end of the world. And then you can consider like going into secondary the movement speed item. The problem with that is you would have to, you know, somehow survive without actual protections for a very long time. This is a bit niche, it's a bit complicated to implement in that way, but it's definitely a very good item right now. I think Witchblade will be picked up. In combination with Midgardian Mail, it should lead to some absolutely stupid stuff. Maybe we even see exactly that. Maybe we see someone look into counter, for example, in Osiris, building into Witchblade, and then building into Midgardian Mail. You have a little bit of movement speed yourself, and the moment you get Midgardian Mail, you will slow the enemy for more than they can chase you down for. Yeah, you have slow rotation speed, you need some movement speed later, that's for sure, but you'll have this slow, which is 15%. It's like almost your boots gone already. So, crazy stuff. And we're not stopping there, but that's the part against the Hunters. Then we also have the Crusher. The Crusher does not get any changes. I would have thought the Crusher would get any changes because the Crusher has been pretty good at the moment. You know, almost every assassin builds some core, you know, that kind of thing. And Hunters build them in third slot as well. Just saying, very good item. But he just gets a visual effect. That's it. Surprised. Ikaivil gets a buff. Ikaivil gets buffed partially back what it lost. Ikaivil still has less attack speed than it used to have, but it gets its physical power gain per passive back from 7 to 10. What I do understand here, though, is that it only gets the passive gained back and not the steal. If I'm correct there, it's still not quite as strong, obviously, but it doesn't say anything about that here, so I'm not 100% sure. Oh, I should show this off, should I? And yeah, Ikaivil is gonna be interesting. Might make a comeback. More in a basic attack based Hunters. I think most Hunters will stick to Crusher. Crusher is super scary right now. But Ikaivil has a bit more of a place as a cheap item. But this one is the real deal. Silver Branch Bow. Silver Branch changes often come with Ikaivil changes, and update 5.5 is no exception. The last update, Ekival was shifted to focus on power, both magical and physical, and Silverbranch was adjusted to focus more on attack speed. Both items had draining effects and were debuffed targets, and they debuffed targets and buffed the user at the same time. We want to separate these items to create more unique effects. So Silverbranch is being changed to focus more specifically on buffing the user's attack speed to extreme levels. Some of you may have seen my tweet recently where I said, why should anyone build Silverbranch when Odysseus Bow exists? Bow has like a little bit higher price tag, but gets a 40% attack speed right off the bat and has a nicer passive. The Silverbranch Bow also has some pen. And Silverbranch Bow now can get 6 stacks. 6 stacks, meaning it can get a total of 50% attack speed. I don't know what to say about that anymore. Like, I'm actually going to open up the stats here as well because it's like such an underused item right now. No, sorry, it's actually 55%. 55% attack speed. You get the attack speed of Odysseus Bow in 3 shots, but you also have 10 penetration for the price of 1,700 gold. But now you can get 50%. I think certain hunters can get away with just building Silverbranch as an attack speed item. Everything else just, power. Maybe put an executioner in there and you're absolutely fine on attack speed. Now the question is it going to be rewarding enough? The problem really is you have to hit a lot of basics to get the effect reliably. Either you have a minion wave or you're decent at aiming. I mean, 3 seconds is not too hard to hit a single basic normally, but depending on the situation, you might not have the attack speed when you need the most. And within 6 shots, a lot of targets have also already taken a lot of damage. This is going to be absolutely devastating, especially against objectives. Question is really how much does it do against players? It's not only hunters that I'm looking at here. There are other characters that could maybe somehow make interesting use of it. It's like, for example, Bakasura. The question is more, how do they really fit that into their builds when they're already, at the edge of overcapping attack speed anyways. Kali could also be a very, very interesting character in that regard, maybe making some use of this. Definitely an item I would say keep an eye on. Definitely an item that would be very interesting with melees with shorter attack chains, not the 1-1-1 chain, like especially Kali here. But definitely one of the hunter buffs in this patch as well. Same with the Ekival. We will have to see what way it develops from here. Asi. Increased base attack speed from 20% to 25%. As we're already talking about attack speed, Asi gets a little more. I think like secondary lifesteal at the moment isn't valued that highly. I think Soul Eater for ability-based hunters is still underrated. Probably better than Asi in many situations. Asi has its perk in the pen and in the passive. And unless you're really playing around the passive, I'm not sure how much you're going to pick Asi up. Like, at the same time, the benefit here is that it allows for trans Asi builds. And I could imagine that being a thing, possibly. So I wouldn't rule it out, but I don't think it's the item to go to at the moment. I don't think it's a bad item. I think it's just not a meta item right now. Spike Gauntlet, increased physical power from 0 to 5. This is basically just bringing it in line more with other level 1, tier 1 items that are just very strong already, whereas Spike Gauntlet is just like lacking behind a little bit in early. Get a bit more of a power spike, but then again, 5 power. Nothing too crazy. Just allows for a better start with Spike Gauntlet into Devils. 8-pointed Shuriken. Decreased cost from 1,700 to 1,500. Everything else stays the same. That is very reasonable because the other crit tree basically has a 1,500 price tag as well. And the 8-pointed Shuriken is just not that great, So I totally understand that. And that brings us to God Balance. Aphrodite, Undying Love. Undying Love can now be cast even if Aphrodite is currently in the air from a knock-up ability. This one is, reasonable change. Just allowing her to use that all the time to get into safety. And that's about it. Not much to say. Cabrakan, Tectonic Shift, adjusted targeter to better reflect the area of damage for this ability. Good change. Because it was sometimes a bit awkward. Chang'e, Moonflower Dance, increased persist time of damaging area from 0.6 to 0.7 seconds. This fixes the dead zone when Chang'e could miss the ability while standing still. Now goes to full 360 degrees. That I think is a very good change because, you know, it's a bit awkward when you think you hit something, but there's this one tiny area where it doesn't hit. I found myself experiencing that more often than I like to, so I am all for this change. Sobek, touch prey. Sobek no longer goes untaggable while plucking an enemy. He instead gains a player pass through, which will allow him to be able to be hit by enemies while he's getting ready to throw someone. I don't understand this change. I think maybe it's something about, you know, it just felt awkward, similar to our Kwang's immunity or something to them, but it was like one of the mechanics that made Sobek so cool that you like pluck someone and then they miss stuff, you know, like the other enemies miss stuff, and that was cool. And now Sobek is like a sitting duck the moment he uses charge prey. I think if they do that in return, they should just shorten the pluck duration so that he, like the throw duration, so that he throws faster and doesn't get punished for CCing someone, like doesn't get punished for catching someone off, because it just doesn't make sense. Even though it's just a short time frame, it's just weird to me. Really strange change because we don't really see that much of Sobek anyway, so not sure. Maybe something that's going on in the pro scene that I've missed so far, but I don't like this one. Ao Kwang gets a Smite nerf, small nerf, ranged dragon throw, decreased magical power scaling from 90 to 78, from 15 to 13 per dragon. That's yeah, that's a total of 12% scaling. I mean, I guess it's like I don't see much of a problem with that. Whatever. Sure, a little bit from that. Tiny bit. Daji gets more nerfs. We were expecting that. Jekyll and I were talking about that. Here it is. Touch of Blades. Decreased physical power scaling from 20% to 14%. 10% per tick to 7% per tick. This is only the scaling, not the base damage. So, yeah, a little bit less damage in that regard. And Horrible Burns. Decreased physical power scaling on burst damage from 45% to 35%. I think those changes are very reasonable. It's some small adjustments here and there. I think the one that is bigger by far is the Torture Blades change, because you underestimate how many Torture Blades ticks you get throughout a match or throughout a trade already. You know, just your 2 alone is 4 of these ticks. So the total scaling that was beforehand was like 80% scaling. It's now down to, what is it, 28 times 2, 56. 56% scaling. That will have an impact. And then, you know, at the 3, at the 1, and it's definitely going to chunk down her scaling a fair bit. It's not going to be the end of Daji, though, I think. I think she still has enough burst. Still has all the same 2 of us before. So, decent nerf. We'll see where she stands afterwards. But I think the capabilities she still has to burst someone very quickly, and the capabilities she still has to CC someone very quickly and, you know, put them where she wants them, would still have a lot of impact anyways. Kukulin. When transformed, Kukulin will no longer gain access to abilities he has not put a single point in except his 2. That means on level 1, he will not have his 1 and 2 and 3, but he will only have his 1 and 2, or his 2 and 3 if you're weird in level 3 first. So, no level 1 kill with 3 abilities anymore. Absolutely reasonable, absolutely understandable, no surprise at all. This was just something that was abused on higher levels, and that's it. The interesting statement here is Kukulin tends to be very powerful at high skill levels, but quite balanced in most other metrics. Surprised. I see Kukulin's still being very dominant and very much stomping in matches without being at a high skill level. So I'm not quite sure where this metric comes from, but well. Discordia. Smite Mage has been causing plenty of strife on the battleground. She is a well-rounded god that can deal decent damage at long range, decent, while also applying CC. The primary feature that led to her being slightly overtuned was her safety. Even though erratic behavior is short range, it provides a large amount of evasion in that Discordia can immediately go untargetable, then stealth herself and quickly regain her cooldowns. Limiting this one ability should have quite an impact on her entire kit. Erratic behavior, increased cooldown from 16 to 18 seconds. I do believe that will have an impact because she kind of uses this to do her cooldown reset as well. And survivability for a mage like that works with like using her combo like twice on you basically, does very much factor in heavily. I do not think this is the end of Discordia, but I think this will take her down a bit. And I think that's good. It's nothing crazy. I think it's good. I think there's some other mages that are in more need of nerfs though, so that's a bit surprising to me. But oh well. Isis, movement speed increased from 355 to 360. Dispel Magic reduced cooldown from 18 to 16 seconds. Circle of Protection increased max charge damage deal scale damage heal scaling from 1.5 to 3.5 to 2.5 to 3.5. So more impact on the early ranks, same at the latest. Increased damage reduction from 15% to 15 to 20%. So same damage reduction at the start, more at later ranks. The scales a little bit awkwardly. It's 15, 15, 17.5, 17.5, 20. So probably one of the more interesting changes, more impactful changes overall as well. I think especially around rank 3, this will, be drastically better across the board. But especially the starting scaling is also really nice. So yeah, this is interesting. Isis getting a bit more mobility is very understandable. Dispel Magic getting a cooldown reduction is actually, I guess these cooldowns were a little bit of older mage numbers, basically. A little bit not fitting with current mages anymore. Maybe that's the 16-second reasoning. And then the ultimate having so much more impact is very understandable at the same time because her ultimate is just harder to use and often doesn't have the impact that it's supposed to. Could be very interesting what comes out of this, especially because we have another god, yet again, who can utilize the Circle of Protection, being Cerberus. So, before that it was usually like someone like Xingtian who could throw people in there. Now we have Cerberus who can throw that a lot more precisely. And with that, I think you can definitely make great use of Isis. So I could see her being possibly even be picked in competitive if these changes turn out strong enough in the right team comp. Sam Wukong. Magic Card shall increase damage from 80 to 90 to 240 to 250, 10 damage more, which also obviously has a bigger impact on minions, and also decrease mana cost from 50 to 90 to 50 to 70. So he can use it a little more. Sam Wukong wasn't there for ages. It's not going to catapult him up in the meta drastically, but it's going to buff him, and that's absolutely fair because he was just out. And the same thing applies for Vulcan. Vulcan already got a buff, but it was not enough. Backfire increased damage from 80 to 240 to 90 to 250, also 10%, 10 damage increase. Increased amount of damage that Inferno Cannon deals to marked targets from 10% to 15%. Interesting. And Inferno Cannon increased magical power scaling from 35% to 40%. So a little bit of damage here, a little bit of damage there. The problem I see with Vulcan right now is not his kit, but the fact that through items like Soul Gem, for example, like Soul Reaver with his buff, all that kind of stuff, a lot of mages are able to, at least to a single target, deal massive amounts of damage with their ultimate anyways. And Vulcan's ultimate was usually, like, what stood out about Vulcan's ultimate was that it dealt even more damage. It just dealt insane amounts of damage. But as it stands, every mage kind of deals insane amounts of damage with their ultimate, and Vulcan's ult is just harder to hit and easier to avoid in comparison. And that makes it complicated to see if somehow has potential. Like, it's just not the same as hitting a Nuwa ult, who is very good in the meta right now. So I'm not sure if this will bring him back, or if it's the same situation as before. But he might slowly make his way up, and then when the meta shifts in a different way through items, then he might suddenly be really strong. That's what I'm kind of expecting for Vulcan. And last but not least, we have a boy. We have Erlang Shen. He struggled to find a solid identity in Season 5. That's always a major source of sustain for Erlang Shen, and with his removal, he has struggled to compete as a tank, bruiser, damage dealer. We're increasing the power of his base kit so he can better utilize items to create these playstyles. Basic attack, increased progression scaling to match swing time from 0.65, 0.65, 0.65, 1, 0.8 to 0.75, 0.75, 0.75, 1.1, 0.9. Why were these scalings lower before? Because he has his dog, which deals extra damage. So he now effectively deals extra damage over others with every single basic attack. interesting point already. Keep that in mind. So basically, scales better than others in terms of his chain now. Solid benefit. Also, spot weakness, increased cooldown reduction per basic attack from 0.75 to 1 second. You can actually not find that information anywhere, the 0.75, so it's good that we know it now. So every basic attack will now reduce the cooldown by 1 second. Before we get to the last change, so remember a little item that got changed this patch, and that's Witchblade. And Witchblade is like everything that you want right now with the spot weakness change, because Witchblade was better. It has 20% attack speed and has 10% cooldown reduction, which means your spot weakness cooldown is already reduced to begin with, and then you also have more attack speed to be able to get spot weakness up more often, which now gets more reduction as well. And then you're also dealing more damage with your basic attacks anyway, so attack speed isn't more beneficial in general, so like outside of that too. So that's all of the things together that can actually work in Erling's favor quite heavily. And then Pin also has a power scaling increase from 45% to 55%. I'm surprised that Erling is falling off so much. I can see it with the death toll, but I think after these changes, Erlang has a new identity, kind of. Because before you'd often see him like as a setup character with the ultimate and the 2 and the 3 having a knock up and everything. His basic attack damage was there, but unless you went into jungle and went like some crazy bruiser build, it was often not that valued. Whereas now, I think Erling's potential as a outlier bruiser solo with like building these wonky items like Witchblade, like Midgardian Mail, whatever. All that kind of stuff works very, very well for him now, I think. And that's going to be very interesting to see how that can be utilized. And that's it for this patch. So overall, a very good patch in my opinion. Much, much better than the one that annoyed me so much. And I am looking forward to what this brings. Though I am surprised that we haven't seen certain guys nerfed. I'm especially surprised we haven't seen any nerfs to Habwa. I'm surprised we haven't seen any nerfs to Crusher. And I'm surprised we haven't seen any nerfs to any mage items. Like that are frequently used, very popular at the moment. So I'm still expecting some changes to come through. Also, Hyris was talking about their crit changes. And we see the change for Melis now, but we don't see the other items being changed yet, or like not drastically, with crit having like a new identity. So we'll see what comes out of that, but I'm looking forward to it. And with that, I thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. If you're new to the channel, feel free to click the sub button and ring the bell. It really helps me out. Other than that, see you for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth out. And as a patch notes video, and I can't attach my outro like normally, there will be links over there, over there, over there, somewhere there. And I'm gonna give you my favorite thing, my outro.